Well, good morning, everybody. It's great to see so many people here, and welcome to this opening panel for day 3 or 2.5, if you count the social event on Monday, on creativity and visual arts. So just to give us a very quick bit of context, if you imagine a Venn diagram with 3 circles, and the first one has creativity in it, the second one has blended and online teaching in it, and the third one has pandemic in it, then we're somewhere in the middle as a panel. That's what we're going to be discussing. What I'd like to do just at the start is to really invite people to chat in the text chat. We're a reasonable sized panel, and we will have the ability to chat and answer questions, get involved in the discussion in the text chat as well as by voice. So I'd really welcome people to reflect on what's being said, to offer their thoughts in the text chat as we go, and we'll get involved as much as we can in that. So I want to make sure we've got as much time as possible for discussion for the panel itself. I'm going to quickly introduce the panel members, but in the kind of micro bio, which sounds like a washing powder, doesn't it? In the shortest way possible. So I'm going to do that in the order that we have on the slides here. So the first person to welcome is Tasia. You actually gave me a short tutorial on how to pronounce your name. Tasia. I got there. Okay.
Yeah.
Graham, who is actually at London College of Communication, which is part of the institution I work at, was the winner of the ALTC student competition earlier in the year, before the year went really weak. And Tasia is freelancing as well as finishing her 3rd year in illustration and visual media. So very busy, I imagine. Mandy Lee Jandrell is the director of the Falmouth School of Art and the Institute of Photography at Falmouth. Puyun Wong, who also works at the University of Arts London, is a Technology Enhanced Learning Coordinator at London College of Communication, and was or isn't at King's as well. I won't introduce myself, that would be a bit much. Christy Naranci, Principal Lecturer in Academic CPD at the University Teaching Academy at Manchester Metropolitan University, and Brian, who is great to have along. I love this phrase, first I listen, then I draw my listen. Some of you may know that Brian actually is behind a lot of the sort of visual and cartoon stylings of alt, which is a really beautiful style and a really great way to realize things in what I always think of as a beyond text way. Okay, that's our panel. Thank you for unsharing the slides. So smooth, so smooth. So you will, because of the nature of this environment, you'll slightly randomly see various of us on screen, and we'll try to be as happy and upbeat as possible as we appear and disappear. So first question for the panel, and just to reiterate, if you've got thoughts on this question yourselves, do share that in the chat as well. So the first question, really focusing on creativity, is what's the relevance of creativity in higher education? And what did a creative approach to the pandemic look like for our staff, students, or for our institutions? And I'm going to start by throwing that question to Chrissy.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Lovely to be here, and thank you for this invitation. Okay, let's go to trying to answer that question. I think for me, universities are about knowledge creation and knowledge dissemination. That means that creativity and openness, I would add, are part of the fabric of higher education. So it is important to remember this. So how do we do that? Through research, through teaching, and citizenship. So as a vital ingredient of what we do, creativity is not just relevant for the arts, but across disciplines and across all professional areas, because it is about problem solving, but also problem finding. And that's really important. So it's definitely not a luxury, it's an essential, but it can also be often seen as hazardous, because it can generate a lot of anxiety among students and staff, and actually drop student satisfaction rate if we believe in these or not. But during the pandemic, to go to the pandemic, the creativity has come to the rescue, it seems, and is seen as a creative vaccine. Professor Paul Crawford wrote about this. And the limitation seems to have given us all the freedom and the permission to actually be creative and do stuff. And that is very, very refreshing. As we know, universities are huge ships, they are super tankers, and it's often really difficult to maneuver and make change happen. Make change happen that is visible. But during the pandemic, changes have been done rapidly. There has been a lot of disruption. We have learned to navigate in these new spaces and the way we work, the way we learn, the way we teach. And we have started reimagining our own practice. And that, I mean, if you look at the publications and the work that has been shared widely, you know, you see a lot of evidence on that. In my own institution, Manchester Metropolitan University, like in so many other institutions around the UK, but also internationally, there have been many, many changes, rapid changes. At Manchester Met, we have introduced block teaching. That was an innovation that came from the top, from our PVC education, Professor Helen Laville. So we all had to unthink and rethink how we do things, and quite rapidly. In a very recent event that I was in our Arts and Humanities faculty, actually earlier this week, a colleague said MMU is on fire. I think what I see is that colleagues and students are on fire, because I haven't seen any buildings. So I think it relates to the humans. So staff, my experience, have become more adventurous, more experimental. They have started daring to do things and take risks more, and they have seen the real value of making human connections with their students. I'm not saying this didn't happen before, but I think now we realize that we are not superhumans, we are just real humans. We are not supermodels, we are real models, and bringing that humanity into how we teach and how we connect with our colleagues, but also with our students, is at the heart of what we're doing. And we have embraced, our colleagues and students have embraced digital practices and digital experiments as well. That has required a huge commitment, you know, from staff, and a drive and a thirst and an appetite to learn and make changes for the students. It's all happening because we want, and our colleagues want, to create that stimulating experience in a very, very difficult situations. But what is interesting is that these discoveries that our colleagues are making don't seem to be just for the now. Colleagues are starting rethinking more longer term. What can we keep from that? What are we learning? And I think one aspect is that flexibility, is that humanity with how we approach it. But it's also okay to try, I think, new things. So that flexibility, that experimentation, that creativity, that inventiveness, that resourcefulness is just magic. But it has also brought exhaustion, I think, to staff, and we need to recognize this. So my question here, and we can follow this up in the chat perhaps, is how can we support our staff? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chrissy. I just wonder whether, Tasia, whether it would be a good point to bring in your your perspective and your experiences as a student throughout this period. I mean, obviously, you're one student on one course, but it would be really interesting to hear how your kind of lived experience of 2020 has been from your perspective as a third-year student.
I would say it's definitely had its challenging moments with the kind of creating, I guess, because I found myself kind of creating in my room, which I don't usually do. I usually work best with others and bouncing off ideas. So in that sense, that part was challenging in terms of like finding inspiration and things like that. I think for me personally, During the pandemic, I've definitely been working on my own projects. For example, I've been working on a children's book, which I wanted to do for like years and years. And I guess the pandemic kind of forced me to do that. And it's definitely made me like self-reflect in how I work creatively. Just kind of being able to kind of focus on one thing for long periods of time, which also that has its benefits and not, because sometimes you can get burnt out. I've definitely experienced burnout as well. But I think in general, being alone and kind of creating is pretty good because I can focus on something, I can perfect it, I can reflect, I can research, I can do all these things. And also I do work primarily online. So when I create things, it would be through my iPad or on a computer. So I guess for me, COVID kind of forced me to take on things that I wouldn't usually. Definitely made me reflect on my work. Definitely made me more aware of what I'm making. But overall, I do think that it's had a kind of positive experience on the way that I make and the way that I think and how am I portraying myself, how my art portrays itself, how people react to my work. So it's been pretty good. Before that, when it wasn't COVID, you know, when I'm going into lessons and I'm seeing my friends and we're talking about things and I'm bringing up ideas, I guess it was also good, but in that sense, I wasn't really focusing on one thing. So the projects that I had in my head, they weren't really real. So I guess for me, I'm now taking in this experience, and I can adapt it and be better, if that makes sense. If I'm making sense here.
That does make sense. Yeah. And I know I've heard from other students that there is, whilst it's been a tough year, that the focus that it's brought has been helpful in terms of being able to reflect on work. Just before I open it out to the panel, I just wanted to point out that somebody mentioned in the chat that creative does not necessarily mean artistic, and I think that's important. Is that this is not a closed shop. Creativity is not a closed shop, and we're all creative in our work. I sometimes like to remind people that academic writing is creative, for example, and so really it's a mindset, it's a philosophy, it's kind of an approach, which I think everybody can be part of. I'll just open it out to the rest of the panel if anybody else wants to come in on what's being discussed.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've also had a bit of a side chat in the chat there. I think you know, agreeing really with everything Chrissy, you know, and Tasia have said, but I think for me it's been about the really interesting thing has been about collaborating with people that I ordinarily wouldn't have worked with in my day-to-day. As a director of a school, we've been able to come together and form teams across lots of different areas of our university. So we've created kind of open innovation working groups that have been fantastic ways to find solutions to really complex problems, and we've been able to generate some really innovative ideas through working together from a range of different areas, from working with student services colleagues to working with those in the digital learning team to working with other academics, actually bringing teams of people together like that who, in my experience, we didn't work as closely together prior to this. It's actually been fantastic. So that kind of ability, that complex problem solving that we've been able to do by not being hindered by geography, I think has been really great in terms of that collaboration. I think also for our students, we've found really interesting new ways. Yes, of course, there's some collaboration that is hindered by not being able to physically work together. But I think some of the physicality, when you remove the restrictions of geography or spaces, can actually open up kinds of collaboration. So at Falmouth, we set up a project in May called the Falmouth Creative, Connected and Courageous Challenges, where we got students to work on a set of thematic briefs, and it could be from any they could be from any discipline, but it enabled them to sort of think outside their own discipline. So illustrators were working on a brief set by the Academy of Music and Theatre Arts, or writers were working on a still life brief set by the School of Art. So it was a really good way, and we actually found some students making incredible work, really out of their kind of discipline area, but it really expanded their practice enormously. And so I think there have been limitations around space, but there was also been really exciting things that have opened up by that. We've just our Students' Union has just launched a new collab platform, which allows students to post up opportunities to collaborate with one another, and that's going to be super exciting. So they'll be able to sort of work on live projects together. So I think collaboration has been a really incredible, new kinds of collaboration has been a really incredible outcome of this, if we can say anything's incredible about this pandemic, which obviously is really problematic, but I think that there's a lot in the chat also about is creativity limited to those who define themselves as creatives or artistic, and I don't think it is. I think actually if we break down creativity to something that's a reflective creative practice, or a critical reflective practice, which is learning and teaching practitioners we all are, but also to some of those things around complex problem solving, flexibility, resilience, finding new ways of doing things, whether that be a new way of delivering learning or a new artwork. We're drawing on quite a similar skill set in terms of how we're going about those things. So I think it's that that's been really valuable, I think, also in terms of how we've been working together in a collaborative way. So yeah, I think for me, just coming back to that collaborative point, that's been really an incredible learning area for us over the last few months, definitely.
Great, thank you. I just open that out because it's the first question. I'll open that out to Ian and Brian. And
yeah, if I could come in very quickly, just to say, I think this year in particular, it has really made our students to really sort of think about making work for the online world rather than making their work in their studios and then putting them online as a byproduct. And I think a lot of students really embrace the almost like the limitation of what we can do on a computer and what we can show with online work. And I think that's really important from an employability point of view as well, because I was thinking about this last night. I honestly can't remember when was the last time I had to show someone my physical portfolio. It was always something you have to kind of like polish up to show your employers or potential employers online. So I think this year has been a great sort of opportunity for our students to think about, well, how do I package my work to specifically for the online world. Another example as well, a friend of mine from Medivh University, at the beginning of the pandemic, he's a woodwork technician. So what he was doing, instead of having to sort of, think about how he supported students without machines, he was starting to sort of like hack wood and making work out of bit of scrap wood in his garden and broadcasting to the students as a way to show them, well, you don't have to necessarily have fancy machines to make your work. You just have to look around your surrounding, asking your friends, your neighbors, what tools have you got, and just sort of make things out of the everyday objects, which is something that sometimes we forget, because some of our students are very fortunate in the way that we have access to fantastic workshop, like professional equipment, and overnight that got stripped away from them. So a lot of our colleagues were really thinking outside the box to think, well, what can we do to support them just using what they have at home? And I think that's been a fantastic year. I know it sounds a bit wrong to say that, but for me it has been really amazing.
I think we have seen, thanks Ian. I mean, I think there are a lot of upsides to this, and I guess you could argue that a creative philosophy approach towards changing circumstances is quite often useful in terms of an ability to adapt rather than necessarily to try and protect, if you like. Not always the case in creative art and design. There's a lot of territories that become protective. I just want to ask Brian a question, which is around sort of this idea of of the visual nature of things, and whether you think that this year has been more, or this is a ridiculous question, so please feel free to interpret anyway. Do you think this year's been more or less visual than previous years?
I think as people sort of are becoming more digital, it's having to become more visual, I guess, in order to just engage with people or grab their attention, I suppose. But I actually want to. There's just some really interesting conversations about creativity and the identity involved with whether someone considers themselves creative or non-creative, because I think it's a problem caused by formal education. You know, I guess it's sort of a Ken Robinson sort of thought of, you know, we start off as very creative and then it sort of gets slowly beaten out of you as you sort of progress through school. And but yeah, and we tend to associate it with artistic endeavors, don't we? Whereas, you know, creative programmers, you know, you don't want too many of them on a team, but, you know, 1 or 2 in a team is brilliant. Or creative biologists, who doesn't want to creative accountants? Maybe not. But, you know, so I think creativity as a thing, people either identify with it or they don't. I think that's a real problem, because I just before the session I was sort of thinking, well, how would I define, you know, what a creative is? And I sort of wrote down, it's someone who no longer needs permission to do something different, right? And I think that's what this is about. We have a permission problem. So many people I come across whenever I'm working with them collaboratively, you know, and trying to sort of create visual ideas, need permission to be able to vocalize their thoughts, you know, to be able to sort of speak openly, to be able to, and I think it comes back again to formal education, where, you know, it's like we're doing creative time, it's Wednesday afternoon, we're going to get the glue and glitter out. You know what I mean? It's sort of in a box, you know what I mean, filed at a certain time. And, you know, I think there's what the pandemic has caused then is the necessity, you know, it's the mother of all invention, as it were. So those who are already enabled, then suddenly they can go for it. They can, you know, it's a bit like, I was reminded of me in the kitchen. I'm a really poor cook, but I've been trying to cook more and more. And my wife is a brilliant cook, right? And I cook very differently if she's in the kitchen or if she's not in the kitchen. You know, if she's in the kitchen, I'm asking her question every 30 seconds. You know, should I put in a little bit of the, you know what I mean? Should I add a little bit of harissa to that? Would that make it too pokey? You know. But if she's not there, I have a completely different experience, right? And I think that almost the pandemic to educators, and to students as well, it's just sort of lifted the lid and lifted, you know, created the ability to go in different directions. But I wonder if that's only for some people, and whether other people have really felt the opposite of that, because they've never been given permission to create, or permission to go in a different direction, or don't quite know what the rules are. Rant over.
No, thanks for that. And the permission idea is fascinating. And what I'm going to do is move on to the next question, because I feel like we could easily have a panel with only one question. Maybe that's a good thing, you know. But just what I'd like to do, so obviously discussion so far has been very upbeat about a very difficult year. And in terms of things like permission, it's, yes, I could certainly, that's a great definition. But as educational institutions, you know, we assess people, we rank people. It's easy to talk about risk. I suppose one of the things that I'm always reflecting on is the fact that we'll say, we want you to take loads of risks, and then I'm going to mark you. Do you know what I mean? And tell you who did better or worse at riskiness. So there's a sort of integral tension, isn't there, in education, between that kind of rather beautiful romantic idea of creating a culture where people can take risks, versus actually some of you are going to fail, some of you are going to do better than others. So the actual question, before I get carried away, because I'm enjoying the discussion, I need to remember to actually chair, is who benefited from teaching being blended online and who lost out? and what can we do to support those who struggled. So I'd really like to focus, I'm going to open it up to the panel, but I'd really like to focus on, you know, where were people struggling? Where was it really difficult? You know, we've talked about a lot of the upsides. What were the tricky parts, and what can we do to balance that out to support people? I'm just going to open that out. So whoever gets to the mic first. Very polite.
I think it depends on, sorry, maybe you go first.
Oh, I was just a very quick one, but perhaps Pian, you'll take us further. But you know, really, I think our concerns around well-being and isolation really are kind of some of the things that we were talking about a lot, and how do we build community, and how do we support our students when we can't see them face to face. I think that's been a huge challenge, and maybe that's something to discuss in this space. But yeah, hand you back over to Pian.
I was going to make the same point. I think it depends on what kind of struggles there are. I think for me, for my kind of day-to-day digital learning support, I've been seeing two types of struggles. As what Mandy was saying, there's isolation, there's sort of, you know, falling behind and not having your peers around you physically in the same room. That is something that we've been, as an institution, trying to support in terms of helping staff to kind of help the student to engage with each other virtually. And I've certainly seen some fantastic examples of you know, online cafe. I was doing this sort of like mini Moodle audit the other day, and I was seeing some fantastic collaborative room being named as something like the Big Sofa, the cafe, or no staff zone. Those are the things that our staff are trying to get a student to engage more with each other. And it is difficult because when you're not physically in the same space, it's a bit more challenging for those, particularly the ones who are a bit more shy, to kind of try and engage. So it is a challenge. And the other struggle I've been seeing is I don't know if there's an answer for it, so I'm going to open up to the floor. Is having access to the right platforms and having access to the right technology and equipment. And I know certain parts of the world, for example, China, students are having a particular difficult time in order in terms of, you know, getting online and joining in because of the, you know, the politics over there, and there are lots of students who simply can't afford the fancy equipment that some of us have. So those are the struggles that are very real, and I don't know if there's a solution for it. So yeah.
Yes, can I jump in?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, okay. Yes, following up on what Pujin says, I mean, we are all after digital fluency, and you know, the employers, we know that in order to live well and survive and thrive, that's what we need in the 21st century. But like Pujin said, there are digital access problems. And it is, I think, a responsibility of the universities, maybe even beyond that, society in some way, to make learning possible for all. I mean, that goes back then to the ideas and the ideas and the values of open education. But why does it need to be, you know, a money-driven sort of sector? Can it be a value-driven sector? And what would that mean for creating a more inclusive, a more creative education sector as a whole, not just for higher education? But people who have benefited are, I think, those who have digital fluency and those who are open to experimentation while they have access. If access is not there, if the foundation is not there, I'm not sure a lot can happen.
Thank you. I'm busy typing in chat. Tasia, I wonder if, without, you know, I mean, it's up to you what you want to disclose or not, but I don't know if you've got any reflections about fellow students that have found it difficult and what their experience might have been like.
Yeah, so from my perspective, a lot of my friends have been struggling with isolation. Some of them have been depressed over it. Some of them need social interaction. Some of my other friends, they don't really have access to laptops or iPads. Fortunately, I have been, so this wasn't as much as an issue for me as it was for like other students. But I do think to help like my friends, I would say definitely give access. Universities could give access, like give them laptops or like things that they can use as resources. I know like in UAL we can go into the campus like 2 days a week, but I think it's not really a lot of time because it is in time slots, and you know when you have to do all the stuff online, I mean, and then you can only use a computer for 3 hours. I mean, it's not that helpful, and I can see how it can really make the students suffer, I guess. I think I really to really help us, giving us access to technology would really help. I mean, I have a friend who doesn't really have anything but pens and pencils, and that's how she works, and she's really struggled during the pandemic. She has been going into campus, but it's not a lot, you know. For me personally, I think if from a student perspective, I think if you're like an independent student, I think working online and working by yourself is fine. But say if you're a collaborative student who likes to work hands-on, I can only imagine how hard it can be. I would say give us access to just kind of to collaborate online, I think, but more so with my course, we've been posting our projects on like a Padlet, so we get to see all of our work. But I think it would be really fun for us to have like an interactive kind of face-to-face where we can see everyone and we can like show our work. I mean, I would love that. I just think, you know, I think it would be good to hear from my peers on how they think. I can only speak from like what they've told me, but I think definitely give them access to computers and things like that, and also have a more collaborative space online.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think, thank you. That's very thoughtful reflection. And I think this year has been the year where designing collaboration into your pedagogy has become enormously important. I think the physical buildings, collaboration can sometimes flourish as a side effect of a physical building, but it doesn't tend to happen by accident online. And I think that's been a real big learning curve for a lot of us in terms of teaching is how to facilitate collaboration when you're just in online spaces, and we can see how important that is in terms of the way that it helps with the work, whatever subject area you're working in. But I think even more importantly, a side effect of collaboration is social, isn't it? And so I think that's been crucial. I think a lot of us have been discovering that it's a quite a specific art form in itself, facilitating collaboration between students and between staff. I liked what you said about making work visible and using that Padlet as a really concrete example. When we're in the buildings, I think work does become visible to each other. It creates a great culture. When you're online, it has to be designed into the pedagogy. And the courses that I've seen really thrive are the ones where they encourage students to make their work visible to each other as it's being created. I think it creates a really inspiring environment. And obviously, there's a lot of technology that can help us to do that, but you've got to decide to design it in. I'll just open that up to the panel again, then, in terms of, you know, who's been struggling and how we can address that.
Well, can I just say something, just picking up where Tasia left off, really? She mentioned the word isolation, and you know, my job is isolated. You know what I mean? I was saying to Maren before this call started, you know, even though we're self-isolating at the moment, my work hasn't really changed because I work at the bottom of the garden in a shed. I spend most of my time with my kids that if I'm not in a shed, and but I know myself. You know, I'm self-aware, and I see the signs of isolation. So usually for me, it means you know, that my highs are higher and my lows are lower, right? So I can create something, and then sort of it can fall out of favor with my eyes very quickly, and I end up not sharing it, and my perspective is off, right? And I start to see signs of that, and realize, listen, you know, I need to have some people time, but I'm talking as a sort of a 40-plus-year-old man here. I think there's always sort of a wave of isolation, you know, as a fairly big ingredient here. That depending on your situation, depending whether you're sharing a flat potentially or whether you're on your own, that can have a massive, you know, sort of impact on how you see your work, how you see your learning, how you see, you know, how you see where you're going. And I suppose I'm talking there for staff and students, and I find myself educating other people because I've been doing this for a long time, you know, and sort of going, hey, here's how isolation works, and here's what it's like for me, and here's how to get around, you know what I mean, to sort of see the signs and to be able to navigate around it, you know what I mean. And for me, it's like going for a walk in a park with someone, you know, socially distanced, of course, but having a sort of a thoroughly good conversation where I can see the person. It's not the same on Zoom, you know. And those sort of knowing yourself tricks, I think, are just so important here. And I just wanted to pick up on that as it's just an undercurrent, I think.
Such a good point, because it's so many people were thrown into working in isolation without having as much experience of it. So self, you know, knowing yourself takes time, and I think that's been a big challenge for many people who've all of a sudden had to work in this way, having been used to working much more socially before. So that's been quite a challenge. I think reflecting on some of the chat as well, I think one thing that I've reflected on in the last few months, and around collaboration and the deliberate design of collaborative activities. The sharing of images is really great. I think what we're trying to think through is how we design more interactive tasks, so that there's an element of sociability to the task that we're asking our students to do in the active learning phase of what they're doing online. So we did one project which was almost like an exquisite corpse. I don't know if you know the game where you have a piece of paper and one draws a head and then you fold it over and the next draws the body and then the next draws the leg. So we've set a kind of a set of collaborative projects where, you know, 4 students would work together on a project, but they would each do a different element of it, but they would have to be a passing over of the work that they'd done to the next, and then to the next, and to the next, and that's created quite a good interactive social dynamic, because we're having to kind of communicate with one another and interact with one another. So I think that's something that worked well, and it's being really deliberate about how we design tasks and activities to share, but also to kind of be interactive with one another, with our students working together, so that there's that sort of social aspect to kind of what they're doing. They're not feeling as isolated. So I think that's something that we're you know, I'm certainly thinking through as we go forward, how we build much more of that into our delivery and our curriculum, I think.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
Following on Mandy's thought about the design, I think there's a big temptation, I think, to cram things into the curriculum, having more activities, having more tools, having more platforms. And we all feel, I mean, we ourselves, you know, who might be a bit more familiar with some of these technologies, feel overwhelmed. So imagine people, students and staff, who are completely new to this. So, I mean, my suggestion is on that to simplify. And less is definitely more. It's not about the gadget, like colleagues here on the panel and in the chat are saying. It's about bringing people together, working together, learning together, teaching together, and sharing that experience.
Thanks. Yeah, great. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move to the next question, so that we respond to as many questions as possible in the time. So this question is I think, I'll say the question first. Some would say that our institutions will now have more activity online than in buildings. If this is the case, what does it mean for how we use our buildings? So, anybody in senior management is really massively asking this question at the moment, and it's a huge question in art and design. I think this question goes way beyond art and design, and it's really the big question of 2021. I think is. Are we prepared as institutions to learn to take from what we've learned during the pandemic and re-engineer how we use the physical spaces, or will we just rush back to how we were before? So I'm going to open that out to the panel, but I just want to sort of like a coda on that is I think everybody in learning technology and in online blended learning and in and around alt probably needs to have a perspective on this question, because I think this question is going to be coming up quite a lot, actually.
So Dave, I might talk about a project that we did in the Institute of Photography a couple of years ago, when we moved a lot of our technical learning to a blended model. And what we kind of did, we did two things. One, we moved the technical learning to a blended model where students would have some asynchronous learning that they would do. So this might be, learning how to use a camera, or a sound recorder, a piece of sound recording equipment, quite technical stuff. The way we used to teach that was in larger groups. The technical instructor would deliver the same content over and over again in a space that was kind of unflexible and quite a kind of a very traditional digi-lab sort of space. I'm sure we've all got those on our campuses, regular kind of teaching space. What we did was rethink that space and how we would use it. So we flipped it all around. We did a blended mode where the students would have some pre-learning, a video. They would actually come into the space to get their hands onto the equipment and use it in much smaller groups. So their learning was much more authentic and much more bespoke. They could actually understand how to use it rather than sort of learning quite passively. They were learning much more actively. But it also made us completely reimagine how that space could look and feel. And one of the biggest principles was making a social space, and a space that could facilitate flexibility and lots of different kinds of active learning or activities. And we could do things like we made social collaboration areas with sofas and bean bags, which sounds very Google and all of those sort of like those things, but actually it was really great for facilitating conversation for students to work together and to work together just on working on their dissertations, but also we opened up a gallery space. The students started proposing pop-up exhibitions. We did bookmaking workshops, and actually it let us do a whole lot of other things in that space that we couldn't do before. So I think I'm really excited about that, actually, that we can liberate spaces from certain types of learning and facilitate our spaces for lots of different purposes, and focus more on that kind of collaborative task-based active learning in the physical space, the stuff where that social aspect of learning is really important. I love the comment there, there's a Cornish seagull. Yeah, they're everywhere. Yeah, so welcome to my soundtrack of my life. But yeah, I personally, it's an area that I'm really interested in designing collaborative spaces, social spaces, spaces where students can really own them and propose projects to do things in. Our students have produced amazing exhibitions. It only took a couple of months for them to start proposing really great and innovative shows, trying things out, and it was great. It's been a really interesting experiment, and I think there's a lot to be said for rethinking how we're using that coffee spaces and stuff.
Yeah, and just if I could come in here just to follow up what Mandy have said, we at UA also only have sort of similar social learning spaces as well. In fact, my last job as a digital media technician I was working in a sort of like a social learning space where we have computers, they are important, but they're not in the sort of traditional setup where you have rows of computers, and we certainly have bin bags and solvers and whatever. Students can come in and have a coffee and have a bag of chips or whatever, and then they just sort of talk. They sometimes they come in, they've got all the equipment, they just want to come in and enjoy the social aspect. And I think that is something that needs to be celebrated more. And I think we are, certainly from the point of view of UA, I think we are gradually moving towards that direction, having more kind of social learning space. And I'm really excited about, we're LCC when we move to the new building across the road, whenever that eventually happen. I'm quite excited to see if this is going to be more of the focus. And I think looking at the the planners, the planning sort of drawing, that there seems to be the case, a lot more kind of agile working for student and staff. And the other thing as well, though, in terms of liberating the building, absolutely, because I work till quite late, even back into sort of before COVID, and sometime after 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, teaching sort of finished, and then I walk around the building. It's just there are so many empty rooms not being utilized with computer equipment, or even just an empty room. The campus is open till 10 o'clock. Why can't we open up the spaces for the students, at least in the evenings and weekend, for them to use it? Because I used to work on Saturdays as well, and the building was virtually empty. And I just think it's such a waste of space. So I say to remove all the locks from the buildings, just let it go. Just people can just first come, first serve. I think that would be it'd be chaotic, but I think yeah, you get what I mean. So I think liberating the building, definitely, yeah. Sorry, Chrissy, go on.
Yes, can I add to that? Yes, I mean, it's fascinating to hear everybody, Mandy and Pujin, lately now talking about the social dimension, isn't it, of buildings, and the opportunity and the need perhaps to use them more in that capacity. I would say maybe there is an opportunity to move beyond just social spaces for students. Why not embrace the communities? You know, we talk about the need for lifelong learning and life-wide learning. Why do we put barriers, for example, in libraries for people to get in? You know, knowledge should be accessible to all. And I've seen that at Salford, where you don't see physical barriers, and it's completely a different experience. I think there is an opportunity to rethink here radically, perhaps, and be brave to make changes that will have impact not just on how we teach, how we learn, how the campus looks like, because at the moment, I mean, we used to go to the campus. The campus has come now to us, to home, isn't it? So we're almost like many campuses, like satellites around, but definitely far too many empty rooms, far too many empty facilities that are not used. And while you have people who don't have access to learning, you know, bring them in, open up.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I think one of the reasons why I was interested in this question is because I think that we need to be careful as a community not to push back against the idea that this is a fight between the digital and the physical, that doing more of one means doing less of the other, when I see them as completely flowing in and out of each other. So I think you know, we're in a position as a community to actually frame this really, really positively, so that it occasionally over COVID, I felt like people imagined that the digital caused the virus. You know, it's not, we didn't all want to be online the whole time. That's been caused by a pandemic. We've learned a lot through that. But as a community, we're not looking to necessarily swallow up everything that's happening. We have buildings for a reason. They're great for certain things. I think the question is, do we use them for what they're best at? And can we incorporate digital into the picture in a way that kind of liberates our buildings to be used for what they're best at?
Can I say one thing as well?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so going to LCC, I think one of my favorite spaces was the digital space, because you kind of walk in and you're kind of like transformed. I just think that when I first walked into it, I just knew that this was a space that I can use, and this is a space that I've like, yeah, I've seen you there. This is a space that I frequently go to, because when you think of like, when you walk into LCC and it's just like so plain, and like you walk down halls and everything's white, and it just kind of looks like a maze, I guess. And then when you walk into the digital room, you've got plants, you've got like colors everywhere, there's like seats, people are talking to each other. It just looks really fun and collaborative, and I just think it would be so cool to see LCC just have so many different rooms like this, but kind of catered to like different spaces. Like if there was like a painting room, that would be interesting. If there's a photography, or like a really fun photography room, that would be cool. I mean, we have so many like rooms that are just like just bland and just computers, and it's like we're at a university and we're meant to explore our creativity, but our campuses are not reflecting this. So I just think that I think we could be doing so much more, and I think it would really be beneficial to especially like creative students, if we just had these like rooms that we could use. And personally for me, like I do work digitally, but I'm a painter as well, and it's like I don't see any rooms that I could literally just bring my canvases, paint all day, and you know, I'd have to take everything back home. But it's like it would be so fun to have a room like that that isn't just like a weird like white space with like a few chairs.
Yeah, I think I heard from a member of staff who I won't name a couple of weeks ago who said, so this might be contentious. I think it's an interesting starting point. He said the physical building's too precious to be wasted on teaching. Discuss. So so I think there's an opportunity, and I think, you know, if there's really senior people somewhere in this room, you heard it here first. You know, there's a lot of people behind this kind of shift in emphasis that digital allows us to do. You know, the effect of the digital on the physical rather than the other way around is actually quite refreshing. What I'm going to do is I just want to finish up the session today, because we're getting pretty close to time. I'd like to ask each member to very quickly, like 20 seconds, on this question, which is essentially, what do you want to keep from what's happened in 2020? What do you want to hold on to the most?
Everything.
Okay, I'm going to go to you, Puyin, because I can see you in front of me. So you get to answer that question. Everything. Right, there you go.
Long may it last. Well, maybe not the virus bit, but long may it last.
Okay.
I think all I want to hold on to personally is the kind of the online collaboration that we have, the friendship that I've built this year with people has been just amazing, and I just want to say thank you to everyone who've made me feel so welcome. You know who you are on Twitter, whatever. And on a serious note, in terms of creative art, I think what I see holding on to is the global collaboration, the sort of transnational collaboration between students. They don't have to be physically together, but yet they are producing like really amazing work just through online communication, whatever way. So that is something I certainly want to see, sort of, you know, being something that won't be forgotten if and when we get back to normal, whenever that is. So yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go to Chrissy now, because I just happened to see her on video a second ago.
I have no idea how these things change. They seem to be random. Anyway, yes, I think definitely the experimentation. I would love to continue seeing colleagues and students and anybody else who's, you know, has a desire to learn, to continue experimenting and dare to try different things, to work with others. And that collegiality, like Jean has just said, you know, is really important. It was heartwarming to see, and to be flexible in our approach, to continue being flexible in our approach, in our thinking. And I'll finish there.
Lovely, thank you. Okay, Mandy.
Mine just goes back to that global collaboration. So working together and open innovation, but global collaboration has been the most incredible thing that's come out of this. I mean, being able to, we've set up a global photographies network with colleagues at UAL, Westminster, Leeds, but South Africa, Mexico, Taiwan, Hungary, where we've brought academics together from all of these countries and our students together, and I think that's been incredible. So I think that digital collaboration globally is also about diversifying our knowledge and increasing our knowledge from lots of different positions, and I think that's the super exciting thing about this. And I just see it as a really good way of understanding how other people work and opening up new ways of working too. So yeah.
Lovely, thank you. Brian.
Yeah, for me, I think it's this is a little bit weird, but it's the noticing, right? Even just the last conversation that we had, where we're like, hey, why can't we do things differently? It's not a conversation that was being had a year ago, and yet there's a comment in the chat about sort of Finland's been doing this for a while. You know what I mean? These spaces already exist. It's not actually rocket science, but suddenly we're noticing more that things can change, things possible. You know, people focusing locally. Me personally, I've just been focusing on nature. It's just been in my face. You know, it's just been brilliant. You know, because triggered. Maybe that's that creative constraint that you spoke about, Dave. You know, that sort of forces you to notice and wonder more. But that noticing and wonder, I think, is powerful. in terms of an essential ingredient to change. So yeah, more of that, please.
Thank you, Ryan. And a last word to our student representative seems only fair. Tasia.
Yeah, sorry, I was literally just reading the chat.
Well, that's a good thing.
I think I would say flexibility and freedom. I think that we should be able to work on our own and have our own ideas, but then also use campuses to collaborate with each other when we want to and when we can. I don't think there should be like a time limit on when we can go here or a set day. I just think there should just be more freedom. I mean, obviously we can't do that right now because of the pandemic, but I think we should take on what we've learned, like working alone and being more independent, especially as creatives, because being a creative, we're quite isolated in general. So we can take this kind of information and then use the campuses to kind of create it, you know, collaborate and just have fun. I mean, that's what it's about.
Lovely, thank you. Okay, I think I'm gonna draw us to a close there so that we don't do that thing where sometimes panels just accelerate, and then suddenly stop. I think that's been, thank you to the panel. And thank you to everybody in chat and also people who have been listening and reflecting. You don't have to be typing or talking to be actively engaged. Little pedagogical note there. That was a really rich and useful discussion, and I think also importantly, you know, we're drawing that idea of creativity to be broader than just around specific disciplines. And hopefully, you know, starting a really useful discussion around what about how this year perhaps has an implication for the shape of our institutions, shape of the sector in the future. And I think, as I say, the alt community is going to be enormously important in shaping that. So I just want to say thank you. If you can find the clap emoji, now's a good time to say thank you to the panel. And I don't know if Maren.
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you,
to
David.
say a couple of things about what's coming up next. But I'll
yes,
hand over
thank
to
you very much, and thank you everybody for fantastically inspiring start to the day. We've been so privileged to have you all join this session. We have got a 10-minute break now, and then there is a parallel session program starting at 11:10. So hopefully you've got a bit of space to move between rooms. We're all reconvening in our plenary space at 2 p.m. and then for this afternoon's award ceremony at 4:30 p.m. if you're on GMT. So from everybody here, have a really good rest of the day, and thank you very much, everyone.